at your school, our remit is to provide advice and guidance. And depending on what county you're in, some of you might be in Gloucestershire, so I would be the contact for that. Some of you might be in other counties. And at the end, I'll just direct you to who would be the appropriate person in your county to reach out to if you were seeking any sort of advice and guidance on anything. So as I mentioned, this is a bit of a whistle-stop tour of secondary education, choosing a school and what to expect. So we're going to just cover the main types of school that are available for secondary schools, choosing a secondary school, things to be considering, how you're going to apply, what some of the main differences are between primary and secondary school, and transition and things that can be done to support the transition. And it's really important to be thinking about how individual it is to your child. So I might be saying things more generally, but you will think, actually, for my child, that's really important. And for that doesn't apply to me at all. So please do take the bits that you need to take from it. So these are the main types of secondary school. So we've got community and local authority maintained schools and academies. These are the main two schools that you will come across most commonly. I think just recently academies are equaling the number of local authority maintained schools. So community and local authority maintained schools are non-selective schools. There's no test to enter them, and they are run by the local authority. Now, they also need to follow the national curriculum, which is set by the government. And up until very recently, academies had much more freedom to do this, whereas local authority maintained schools had to follow the national curriculum, and academies had more freedom, more flexibility. There's recently been the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill, and it's proposed that academies will no longer have such flexibility about what they're teaching, and they will also need to teach the national curriculum. So academies overall tend to have a bit more freedom around what they can do compared to local authority maintained schools. So, for example, in Gloucestershire here, we might have an academy trust, and it may have several schools within it. So one of them is the Sand Academy Trust, and that's got several primary schools and special schools within it. And there'll be similarities, because they're run by the same trust, of how those schools are run. Then got grammar schools. So these are selective schools, and they will select their pupils based on academic ability, and they will need to complete, children will need to complete the 11+ exam and pass this to get into the grammar schools. Got private and independent schools. So these are the schools that commonly will charge fees for children to attend, and they may have an extended day. So they might have they might finish later because there's certain mandatory things to do. They might have weekends, so Saturdays, they might have days of sport that they do. So they are completely different, often in structure as to how they run. They might typically have longer school holidays, which, you know, I mean, 6 weeks is already long. So longer school holidays is very long there, isn't it? And then we've got special schools. So special schools cater for children whose needs can't be met within a mainstream school, or who would be better supported with specialised provision. So in most cases, a child will need to have an EHCP, an education healthcare plan, to attend a special school. And typically you might find that a special school may focus on one area of special educational need, or they might have a crossover and there might be a couple of areas that they specialise in. There are also some other types of schools, but these are the main ones that you'll come across. Okay, apologies that my slides aren't very, you know, jazzy and attractive. I'm not the best with IT. So choosing a secondary school. Now, as I mentioned, it's really important to think about what's individual for your child. You know, what does your child need, or children? Now, at the moment, we are in the throes of open weeks, open days, open evenings. So you may have already been to visit some places. You may have something coming up. Have a look at school websites to find out when their open days are. they really are a good way to get a feel of the school. And I think sometimes just walking around, you can kind of pick up on the certain tone of the school and the ethos of the school, and they're a really great way to get a feel. So find out when the schools you're maybe considering, find out when their open evenings are, because they are usually now. I think some of the local schools to me have already had theirs. So yeah, really, really early on in the year. The internet, school websites are also great ways to find out all sorts of information about the school. And there's many things that they have to publish on there. So have a look at those as well as your absolute starting point. So things to consider. Academic performance. So when you're looking at a school, they are rated by Ofsted on lots of areas, including their academic performance. And Ofsted, up until recently, gave them a one-word grading. So these are either that they're an outstanding school, they're a good school, they require improvement, or they're inadequate. I would advise that when you're looking at a school, you're looking at outstanding ideally or a good school. They're the kind of Ofsted gradings that you'd be looking for. But it's recently moved away from one word grading, and there's more categories of gradings now. So there'll be several either outstanding, good, so they might have a mixture. But these can be found with a really quick Google search. Type in the school, type in Ofsted report, and you can just look at the top and it will just tell you what that school is. So that will give you just a general idea of how Ofsted have judged the school. Sizes can really vary with secondary schools. So you might get a secondary school that is 500 pupils. You might have a secondary school that has 2,000 pupils. And obviously that's just going to make a difference in the size of the buildings, maybe class sizes, busy corridors. And this is something that to think about, maybe if that's something that you feel your child might struggle with in those larger settings, then maybe that's worth considering how large the school is as well. And that's something else that can be found with a quick Google search. Quite easy information to come up. So travel and logistics. So I'm sure this is something that you would naturally consider anyway, but do they offer a bus route if your child's going to need to get the bus? What time does the school day finish? Actually, does this work in line with when I'm available to either pick up my child? Can my child walk there? How are they going to get there? Are they going to walk with their friends? Can they walk, do they pass their house? Are they going to lift share? Those sorts of things to just factor into the school day, just because I'd say timings of school days are often slightly different to primary school when they're in secondary school. So it might be that the school finishes at 3:30. So it's just thinking, okay, well, what are the logistics there of how that child's going to get to and from school? Curriculum and enrichment. So the curriculum might be really, every school has to follow the national curriculum. That's a local authority maintained school, and now moving towards academies as well. However, they might specialise in particular areas. So it might be that they specialise in languages. So when it comes to GCSE options, there might be more options on offer because there's maybe more languages that are taught at the school. There's different enrichment opportunities as well. So schools are going to have different facilities. It might be that your child has a really particular sport that they love and they excel at, and you think, actually, yeah, that's something that is really, really important for us, and we've got to make sure that that's something that's offered. So you might be looking at the facilities that the school can offer, or it could be their sports facilities or swimming pools, things like that. So that's just something to bear in mind as well. SEND support, so special educational needs support. So every school must publish a SEN information report, which can be found on their website. And this will tell you about the provision and support that they put in place for children with special educational needs. Now, I would recommend you can have a look at that, but equally I would highly recommend that when you are visiting these schools on open weeks, open days, open evenings, that actually you just go and visit. There's usually a part of the school, and the Senko will be there, and either teaching assistants or members of the team, and go and have a chat with them, because I think that's a really good way, rather than sort of just reading information off a report. That's a really good way to see the classroom, see what's available to them, and get a feel as well for the kind of staff that might possibly be working with your children, and what they can offer. So that's a really important one as well, I would say. In terms of I'm not going to go into too much detail on special educational needs, because we are running a separate session, and that is the prime focus. So there'll be a whole session talking about that. So please do sign up to that. I think that's in a few months, if that's something that you're interested in. But just very briefly, if your child has an EHCP in primary school, that will transfer with them to secondary school. So that's automatic. My plans, in my experience, whilst they absolutely should transfer with the child, sometimes there's something lost in the transition there, and it's something that you need to be maybe very forthcoming with the secondary school, that your child has a My Plan and that is transferred across with them. So whether you've got a copy with it, or you're asking the school to make sure that they're sending copies with it, because that is part of the graduated pathway. So the graduated pathway in Gloucestershire is children will have a My Plan. This may then go to a My Plan Plus and a My Assessment, and then this may go to an EHCP. So that's the kind of chain. So yes, as I said, an EHCP will automatically be transferred, because the school is named on the EHCP. My plans sometimes need a little bit more support to make sure that joining up is happening. Some schools are absolutely excellent at this, and they will have the Senko from the secondary school come and meet with the primary school Senko and talk about all the children in great detail, and they've got the plans. But yeah, it's just something to make sure it is actually happening, and just to maybe chase up. So pastoral care. Again, this is something that can really vary in secondary schools. So if it's something, obviously every school has a safeguarding duty for the children, but they will offer different levels of pastoral support. So it might be that you have a secondary school that has a nurture room, they might have a wellbeing space, it might have sensory boxes and members of staff that are just employed to work in that space. They might have ELSAs, which are they might be teaching assistants that are trained to support emotional literacy, and they can run interventions to support children. So it's worth asking about what is offered. When you walk around the school, you might see those spaces. And it's about what interventions they can offer as well. And this is for SEND support and pastoral support. You know, do they offer any form of therapeutic interventions? Do they offer sort of education curriculum based academic interventions? What is that? What does that offer look like? So it might be that children are removed from classes. It might be that things happen after school. It might be that they're in lunchtime. You know, there's lots of different opportunities, and it can really vary between secondary schools. So social connections. I would absolutely not recommend that you base a decision solely on where your child's friends are going. But what I will say is, if you think that your child may particularly struggle with starting a new school on their own, not knowing anyone. I mean, schools can be great at buddying them up. But if you maybe think, oh, well, I'm hoping that, you know, my child will go into school with their friend, and we know they're going to this school because it's the local school and there's lots of children going and they'll know those children, then it's something to consider if it is the local feeder school. So often clusters of primary schools will have one secondary school that's local to you, that will be the main one it'll feed into, and you'll often find the majority of pupils, with some exceptions of course, may go to that school. So yes, something just to think about. But as we know, sometimes they might have a best friend that they go up with in primary school, and by the first term of year 7 they've made a completely new group of friends. So yes, not something to obviously base huge decisions on, but worth considering. And then we've also got the school ethos and values and their policies. So as I mentioned, when you walk around a school, when you speak to the staff, you'll hear about their values, you'll get a feel for the type of school it is. But I would also recommend, again, this can be found on their website, is having a look at their policies. Because again, I think this can really give you a good feel for the school. So you've got the SEN information report that I mentioned before. You might want to have a little look at their behaviour policy, if that's something that you think, okay, well, this could be relevant for my child. You know, how do they respond to those sorts of incidents? Do they have restorative practices? Is their policy focused on repairing that relationship and restoring that relationship? Or is it a more punitive approach? You know, does the school use an isolation room where children are removed from lessons and spend time in the isolation room? Sometimes it's called something else. So that's something to consider as well. You also may want to have a look at their pupil premium policy. So pupil premium, if your child is a previous child in care, as you may be aware, if you let the school know that your child is a previous child in care, the school can claim pupil premium for that child. And that's about £2,600 at the moment per year per child. Now, it's important to mention that is not a ring-fenced amount for your child. So the schools have discretion on how they use that, as long as it is in line with the menu of approaches set out by the government, and it is supporting the cohort of children that it's meant to be supporting. And again, this is something that, because schools have a bit more freedom on how they can use it, it is very varied depending on the school. So that's something to think about as well. So it might say in the policy, oh, okay, this is something we've employed a wellbeing member of staff, and they work with the children. That might be something that you'll see in the policy. So questions to think about asking. There's an absolute wealth of resources that can be found online, of things to ask. So things that you might want to be asking those key staff, and it might be that you're asking the SENCO, it might be that you get to speak to the head, certain subject teachers that you might be asking. So PAC UK, and let's hope this link works now. There we go. So they've got some on their website, and just some ideas. So have staff receive training on attachment and the impact of early trauma and loss? So that's something you might be asking, you know, are the school attachment aware? How are they providing those consistent key relationships? You know, does the teacher, if your child has a teaching assistant, does that teaching assistant stay with your child, or does that teaching assistant stay within maths, for example, and then your child might have a different teaching assistant for another subject? So it's got some really great questions on there that you can ask for the school. Oh, I've opened it 3 times. There we go. Oh, Adoption UK has also got some great, is this one going to work? There we go. Adoption UK has also got some on there. Some more questions. So what sort of training has the staff had? How much experience do they have with care experienced children? What's the homeschool communication like? So lots of fab questions on there. And then at Gloucestershire Virtual School, and there'll be different things depending on what area you're living in, but equally, if you're not living in Gloucestershire, you can still go on our website and have a look at the things that are on there. So we do have a section called Parent and Carer Resources, and on there, and this is in process of being updated, so please do bear with, but there is some good stuff on here. So we've got a section supporting transition, and we've linked to those PAC UK questions on there, and we've also got another resource, choosing a school questions to be asking as well. So that's all on there as well. So there's lots of support there of things if you think, oh, what do I ask? And be selective with, you know, what is relevant for your child, what is really important for their needs now and their future needs. And obviously you will be the experts in that. So absolutely have a look at those. Okay. So applications. We are in the throes of the application window at the moment. If you have year 6 children, some of you might have younger and you're just really organised. Wish I was that organised. So we have in Gloucestershire County Council, we have an online application form, and this is quite common for county councils. And there's often a written form that you can do as well. So let's see, there's me going on this. Let's see if I can show you the application form. I think I can. There we go. Oh, it's formatted a bit strange. So yes, so this is where you will put your preference of school. Now, if you let on the application form, if you share that your child is a previous child in care, they will be eligible for priority admissions. So that means in the same way as well, if your child has an EHCP, the school will be named on their EHCP. So again, it's priority admission. So you don't have to share that information at all. If you do not want to share with the school that your child is previously looked after, you do not have to. But it does mean that they won't be able to claim the pupil premium, and it does mean, excuse me, that they won't receive a priority admission either. But so that's completely up to you. So that means that maybe you can be a little bit more selective with what school that maybe you're considering, and as you're much more likely to get your first choice school. But, and I will stress, the application must be completed on time. If it's a late application, I do believe that priority can waiver. So just to be mindful of that. So I'll just have a little sip of water. Okay. So the application window is open at the moment. So it opened on the 1st of September and it closed the 31st of October. This is Gloucestershire dates, but it's pretty standard across everywhere. So as I mentioned before, open days and school visits, that's what we're in the throes of at the moment. So please do go. There's usually a set evening, open evening that they have at secondary schools, but often they will also have an open week where you can go and you can actually see what it's like in the school day, which can give you a good feel as well for the kind of atmosphere that you're looking at. You know, are children calm? Are they in their lessons? You know, what's sort of going on? That's a really good way to get a feel. Whereas open evenings are great, but obviously the children aren't at the school and there's no teaching going on. Offers come out in March. So, yep, as I said, priority school admissions, there is an appeals process. So should you not get the place that you wanted, you can appeal that decision. However, as I said, if your application is submitted on time, hopefully due to the priority school admissions, if you shared that, you should hopefully have a place in your preferred school. So if your child has an EHCP, it's a slightly different process, as this is because a secondary school needs to be named on the child's EHCP. So typically at your Year 5 annual review, you will be asked about your preferences for secondary school. Now, this may be a mainstream school, or it may be that it's a specialist school. And that will be something that you would need to speak to the primary schools SENCO about, or your SEN caseworker to find out a little bit more information on that process. But what happens is that school is then named on the EHCP and your child is secured a place at that school. Sorry, I didn't explain it very well. So you will put your preferred place, the EHCP caseworker will then consult with the schools, and then once that process is completed and the final version has been amended and the school is named, that is when the place is confirmed at the school. Okay, so sort of things to be expecting then at secondary school compared to primary school. One of the main things is there is a much greater focus on independence and responsibility. And as you can imagine, there's such increased numbers of pupils that it needs to be, and also it's preparing them for adulthood. So there's a greater emphasis on self-management, punctuality, getting themselves to lessons on time. And of course, this is going to be supported initially. Children are not expected to make this big leap from primary school to secondary school without any support. Secondary schools are great at transitioning the children in and sort of giving them that leeway in the first few weeks of, okay, we know you don't know your way, so it's fine that you're late to lesson, that's not a problem. Or, okay, this is how you log your homework, so we'll make sure you've logged it so that next time you know what you've got to do, or this is how you access the systems. So this will absolutely be supported in the early stages. But again, if this is something, an area that you think your child might need additional support in, obviously there are things maybe that you can do at home to help support that independence, but equally speak to the school about this, speak to the SENCO or speak to those key people, so that extra measures can be put in place to provide that extra scaffolding for your child. Subject-specific teachers. So children will have a different teacher for different subjects, which obviously is massively different to primary school, which can be a blessing and a disguise, because often they'll go, yeah, I love my art teacher, they're amazing, or don't really like my science teacher, which, they're not going to be with them all day every day. If maybe there is a member of staff that are thinking, oh no, I'm not so keen on, but it's also a great opportunity for them to meet different adults, but while still having their key staff, which will often be their tutor, and that will be their key consistent person that they will have all the time. So they will usually see their tutor twice a day. They will see them in the morning, they will see them in the afternoon, and then they'll have their subject-specific teachers throughout the rest of their lessons. And it can be really nice as well, because there's a broader curriculum, there's new subjects that maybe they've not experienced before, or maybe in a new way. So science, obviously there's lots more experiments, there's more equipment that they can use, and maybe a child that before really didn't like science is like, oh wow, this is great, I'm really enjoying it now. Movement around school. So as I mentioned before, the children will really be supported with this in the first weeks. Often they maybe have an older student or a teacher that supports them to take them around to their next lesson, so they become familiar with it. But it's just learning to navigate those busier corridors. There might be one-way systems set in the school. They might have lessons upstairs. So yeah, that's just something to be mindful of as well. They're in a larger new school environment. So if they've got lots of bags, they might have PE, they might have a food lesson and their school bag on the one day. So is there something like a locker that can be arranged for them, so they're not carrying, all these bags around the school all day? Structure of the day. So as I mentioned, their key person will often be their tutor, and they will start that day with that tutor. And this is a really key adult for those attachments, and a really good person for them to build a relationship with, because if there's a child who maybe struggles with attending school sometimes, they need that first person that they're going to see in the day to be someone who's going to greet them warmly, and they're going to feel comfortable going into that space. So the tutor is a really, really key person, and they will talk about store things, they will talk about day-to-day things, sort of just like, oh, today we've got assembly and we've got this, that is the role of their tutor. So that's usually how they'll start their day. And then lessons are typically about an hour. Some schools have half lessons, so there might be like a 30-minute lesson, but typically it's an hour. So they might then go and have an hour of maths, an hour of science, break time, and then so on with the other subjects. So again, it's that different structure and setup. They might have a longer day than they used to at primary school. It might be that school starts a bit earlier, or school finishes a bit later. Lunch times are different. do they buy food from the canteen? Are they taking a packed lunch? Just the little things to consider there. Um, Social dynamics. So there's going to be new peers, obviously, but there's also going to be different age groups that they're exposed to. So it might be a secondary school that has a sixth form, which means there's going to be children up to the age of 18. So it might be that year sevens are coming across year 13s who are 18 years old, sort of across the school. And it's just learning that new environment, developing those new relationships. And, they're at the start of adolescence as well. So they're already having those sort of physical changes and psychological changes. So it's just navigating this new environment. But there's also some really lovely opportunities amongst that to maybe be part of school councils or to be prefects and have extra responsibilities at the school. So that can bring some real positives and some real boosts of confidence as well. Or maybe there's more clubs on offer and actually they find peers that are really interested in something that they're really interested in, and that forms their friendship group. And that can often be, maybe those clubs are run at lunchtime. So if a child maybe struggles with going out and having, hundreds of children out on the playground, there's a club that's offered that's a really nice calm space, whether it's textiles club or something like that. Homework. So every school will have a different sort of homework policy. It might be that they set homework on certain days, different subjects set it. The students might have a planner where they manually record it. However, I would say more commonly now, there's apps and it's done online. So it might be that the child logs onto a computer and they can see their homework on there, or it's they can get an app on their phone and they can see it on there, which also means parents can see it as well and see when they go, I've got no homework, I can go and play, I've got nothing to do. And parent goes, well, no, actually, I can see you've got a few things on there. But there is an increase in homework, and I think that can be a bit of a shock sometimes for students to go from primary to the homework expectations in secondary school, but often there will be support offered by the school. So if that is something that you think, your child might struggle with, see what support the school offers. Do they run homework clubs? That's a really common one. Sometimes they run at lunchtime, sometimes they run after school, where there's staff who can sit down and support your child with that homework. Curriculum and enrichment. So I mentioned those briefly earlier. So some schools in year 8, children will pick their GCSE options. More commonly, it will be in year 9 they choose to then begin their GCSE years in year 10 and 11. So that is where they have their core subjects that they have to do. So their math, science, English, so on. And then they get to choose those additional ones, whether it's a language, whether it's an art, and again, as I mentioned, different schools might have a different variety of subjects that they offer, or GCSE options that they offer. So just something to sort of consider as well. And the feedback, naturally, it just is slightly different. So the parent and carer feedbacks that received, you lose that, school gate kind of conversations that you have in primary schools, just because of the nature of the size of the schools and secondary schools. So it's just in more formal ways that you will get that feedback, whether it's through reports, parents' evenings, tutor evenings. But absolutely, if you have a concern and you want some feedback, by all means, reach out to the school and raise it and look for that feedback and check in and say, are they that they're telling me they're getting on, okay, are they, do you have any concerns, if you feel that that's something that's important. Okay, so the transition. So if you've applied for your place, you've picked your school, now what's next? So often there will be transition events for that primary schools will run to secondary schools. So it could be that there's a day where the whole class will go up to the secondary school of the children that are going, and they will spend the day there. They will get to know the key stuff, that they're going to meet their tutors, they're going to meet their head of years, they'll go around the lessons, they'll get a little taster of what the lessons will be like. So that can vary depending on what secondary school they're going to and what primary school. Transition can be a really tricky time for a lot of children. We know this, and particularly for children who are care experienced. So actually, if there's additional transition events that can take place, do try, and if you think, yes, I absolutely would like my child to be involved with that, do try and get them involved. So often it might be that children with an EHCP or a MyPlan will have additional visits to the school, to the secondary school, to support that transition. And they will have more time to kind of meet those key adults. It might be that your child isn't on a MyPlan or an EHCP, but you think, oh, I would really like them. They would really benefit from having those extra visits. So speak to the school's designated teacher. So the designated teacher, every school has to have a designated teacher, and it is their role to promote the education of children who are in care and have previously been in care. Every school will have a SENCO, special educational needs coordinator, and it may be that a school has a head of year or a head of house as well. So depending on the setup of the school will be who is going to kind of establish those transition plans. So it might be a head of year 7 is offering, these extra visits to go up and meet the staff. So speak to your primary school and say, what transition events are being offered, and are there any additional ones that maybe my child could be a part of. You may also want to establish more of a transition plan. If you think this needs to be more supported than just that, then again, speak to those key people, have a meeting, whether you've got a MyPlan review, an EHCP review, or just you ask for a meeting. And think about the sort of things that actually your child will need. Do they need to be introduced to those pastoral staff? Is that something that can happen before? Is it that maybe they can be shown just a picture of them that's on the school website, so they know the face and they know a name to look for? Who is going to be that key adult that maybe they need to approach? Do they need to meet their tutor, who is going to sort of help them throughout the day? Again, you share what you feel comfortable with sharing and what you feel will be beneficial for the school to know. And that's completely individual to how much. As I said before, Pupil Premium Plus and priority admissions do depend on the school knowing that the child is previously in care. But yes, it's completely what you feel comfortable with sharing with the school. And on our website as well, we've also got some top tips for supporting transition. So on that section of the website that I've shown you previously, which is just the Gloucestershire Virtual School, we've got some things to consider when you're supporting your child to go into school. So things like familiarising your child with the secondary school. It might be that you walk past. It might be that you practice the school route in advance before the child's there. You say, oh, well, this is what it will be like in September when you come, and we'll get the bus or we'll walk here. And just really acknowledge their anxieties, and I appreciate that parents are going to be feeling anxious as well, but just remind your child it's completely okay, and there's not a child around that is not going to be feeling a little bit nervous about starting a secondary school, and just having a chat about that and answering any questions, and maybe just dropping in, drip feeding little bits of information, so it's not overloaded all at once, just as the time builds up. Because often in primary school and gets to sort of the summertime of year 6, and it's very much, oh yeah, it's all about moving up, which is great, but sometimes it can be quite overwhelming as well, can't it? And little things like, if you think transition objects might help your child when they start. Again, I'm really summarising this because we do have another another talk, one of these sessions is a bit more focused on how you can support transition. But things to just show that your child that you're holding them in mind when they do start school, or maybe they've got their taster day, and they're going up for a day, and there's maybe something subtle that they take from home that they've got in their bag, just to comfort them, just to know that, yeah, we're thinking of you, you know, we're holding you in mind today. We know it's going to be a bit scary, but it's also going to be really exciting. So we've got some top tips on our website as well for that. So in terms of support for your child, if your child has started the school and you've got some concerns, do absolutely reach out. And the earlier the better. We don't want it to escalate. You know, schools want to know about this early so they can put in the right support that they need to. So if it's a pastoral issue, or maybe just something from home, maybe that it's something like they've had a really bad night's sleep, and you know that bad night's sleep could really impact them on how they are that day. Actually, it might be that you can just pop a quick email to the tutor and just say, so and so has had a poor night's sleep last night. Are you all right to just check in with them this morning? Are you all right to just keep an eye on them today? And sometimes it might mean that tutor can sort of have a bit of extra time with that child in the morning, a bit of an extra check-in just to make sure they're okay. It might be that they let their class teacher that they're going to know and say, well, they're a bit wobbly this morning, but just keep an eye on them. So that can be a really good source. It can also be great if, say, so-and-so's forgotten their PE kit. So that could be another way that you might contact them for. If there's a specific subject issue, you know, your child's saying that I'm really struggling with science, I just don't get it. It might be that you reach out to their specific subject teacher for that subject. Different secondary schools have different formats. So some have head of years, so head of year 7, head of year 8, so on. And some have head of houses. So it might be you're in Abbott House, and that house is from year 7 to 11. So they will be key for pastoral and academic issues. So it's worth sort of finding out who that person is, if it's a head of year 7 that you need, or if it's a head of house. And usually if maybe a tutor or a subject teacher needs to escalate something, a concern or something of support, that's who they would escalate it to, the head of year or the head of house. If it's more sort of safeguarding concerns or pastoral concerns, there might be a pastoral lead in the school. The school will also have to have a designated safeguarding lead, which is referred to as DSL often, or DDSL is the deputy. So they have overarching responsibility for the safeguarding. So it might be that there's something you feel that you would like to speak to them about. The SENCO, again, obviously really, really key, special education needs, My Plans, EHCPs, they are your key person there. Any additional support needs that you think your child might need. And as I've mentioned, the designated teacher. Often the designated teacher might already be the SENCO, or they might be an assistant head or something like that. So it's usually not a standalone role. It's usually added on to usually a level of responsibility that they already have. Okay, and obviously there is the virtual school as well. So whilst the virtual school's role is not to casework with individual children, what we can do is we can provide just general advice, information and support. So it might be that maybe you're not sure about something and you don't really want to ask the school, so you can approach us and just say, oh, you know, what does this mean? Or school have said I need this. What's that? Or what should I do? My child's not settling. What should school be putting in place? So those are the sort of things we can help with. Depending on the virtual school, some might attend meetings. I know that's not a universal offer, so it's not always the case, but perhaps if you're feeling that you would like just some support from somebody, then occasionally it might be that they can come to the meeting and sort of maybe ask those questions that of school and say, well, we're expecting this level of support to be put in place, or can you do this? So these are the sort of areas that are under Adoption West. So these will link, and I think that the slides will be sent out after. So from this, you can just click on them, and it will take you to the virtual school section, which on all county councils, they will have a virtual school section with different resources. So we've got various resources on there for Bath. And then there will be somebody at the virtual school that will be responsible or have the responsibility for previous children care and kinship care. So as I said, that's myself for Gloucestershire. And then these are the contacts for your relevant